and the patience to seek always after the truth, come whence it may, cost what it will. Amen.
Amen.
About Juneteenth, I had no idea. Growing up in New York City, I simply had no idea that there was a day dedicated to celebration of the day when slaves were truly freed, not by an official proclamation as customarily taught, but by an enforced reality, which took the form of one Union general and 2,000 federal troops arriving in Galveston, Texas, to officially free slaves who were still held in bondage in the last southern state in open rebellion. Despite the importance of Juneteenth as a state holiday in Texas and officially observed in another 44 states and the District of Columbia, imagine my surprise to learn that Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 had not done everything which the majority historical narrative had commonly ascribed to it. And imagine my learning that a full 2 years after Lincoln's proclamation, those Texas slaves had yet to be informed by the Republic that they were truly free. My surprise was due to my assumption that the historical narrative that was taught to me as a child was the only primary narrative that there was. So I might add, my education as an adult, which is ongoing, was not only incomplete, but it was also biased. I'm not alone. Had I not participated in Sacred Ground in 2000, I might still be ignorant about Juneteenth. The narrative that I was taught as a child was a black and white one. It was a narrative of absolutes. Black was bad, white was good. Indians were bad, pilgrims were good. You know what I'm talking about. Where and when did you discover that the narrative you were taught was at best incomplete? If we're honest, many of us likely were taught faulty narratives, whatever our race, our gender, our class, or our religion. Part of mature faith is learning when and how the spiritual, religious, and social narrative that we learned as children, or even as adults, has been incomplete or lacking in some way. Truth can stand questioning. It can also withstand competing or multiple narratives being articulated and experienced. So I'm not surprised, really, that I had no idea about Juneteenth. The fact that I was not exposed to a celebration that was meaningful to many African Americans was just another part of American history that was left out or distorted of the curriculum in New York State at the time. One that gave preference to the history of white landowning males and not of females, persons of color, Native Americans, or any perceived minority. Our Bible is rich in slave stories. At various times, those biblical slave stories have been used to justify slavery and unhealthy power dynamics between various tribes, races, and peoples. But our Bible is also rich in liberation stories. Howard Thurman tells the story of, as a boy, being asked to read the Bible to his grandmother, who, of course, as a former slave, was not allowed to learn to read. But his grandmother was very particular about what young Howard could read to her. She never allowed him to read from the letters of Paul, because the letters of Paul were used to tell slaves to honor their masters and be obedient. So Howard's grandmother would only allow him to read to her from the Gospels, from the stories of the Old Testament, where the people were liberated by a just God. That's one reason that many slave owners did not allow slave preachers to preach from anything except Paul's letters, which preached obedience and submission. It was Martin Luther King who preached that the moral arc is long, but it bends toward justice. His phrase speaks to the idea that progress is made slowly over time. It's a source of hope and rejoicing that I've lived long enough to see progress in our church in this regard. Rewriting school curriculum to include truth and a more nuanced interpretation might still be under debate. But at last year's General Convention of the Episcopal Church meeting in Baltimore, Maryland, the House of Bishops and the House of Deputies agreed to a resolution including Juneteenth on our Episcopal calendar. And by the next revision of the prayer book, we will have Juneteenth as an official date on our calendar, which will mean a collect and scriptures, as well as information about the holiday. Also, we know that the National Church and the Diocese of Virginia have task forces studying reparations. And I learned last week that the Diocese of Virginia's task force on reparations has written a curriculum for parishes. It's being tested this summer and should be ready for congregations such as St. Margaret's to use in mid-fall. Progress is being made, slowly, but it is being made. Today's collect calls upon God's household, the church, to minister God's justice with compassion. We here at St. Margaret's have committed ourselves to that ministry. This is our Father's world, and we will not forget that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. Amen.
Amen.